SFJ 4x4 Studios presents
in my oversized four-wheel drive Jeep.
A Jeep podcast starring industry experts.
Pure monosity. What? Say that again.
With mad scientist Scott Brown.
Use my drill press as a sort of lathe.
Our host, Neil Simpson.
If one light goes out, they all go out.
Filled with shenanigans.
We are really professional with Jeeps.
This is I Speak Jeep.
Good morning, people. Neil just walking in on the side here.
I'm here. This is how we're gonna do. We're doing a thing.
Look, even Joe was quicker to get here than you.
Joe's in the comments. Joe's in the comments saying good morning before Neil was anywhere near the studio.
I was checking. We were getting ready to check out a customer. You know what people don't want to hear is the day-to-day activities of us. Good morning, afternoon,
but do they?
Evening, wherever, however you are. This is the I Speak Jeep podcast, which the timer is not running. I've thrown the guys off because, as usual, in my ability to pack 10 pounds of life into a 4-pound sack.
Feel that. I'm very tired.
Yeah.
My name is Neil from SFJ4x4.com if this is your first time encountering us, and this is my lovely co-host.
Mad scientist Scott Brown / windshield gap remover today.
Windshield gap remover. That was your morning project, huh?
Don't forget your camper repair extraordinaire.
Campergeddon.
I can't wait to hear about Campergeddon, and I will tell you about the side conversation because obviously that will lead into the inappropriate projects that we both have taken on in our lives.
Houses suck.
Yeah, and houses on wheels or mobile houses, right? Because mine was
worse.
supposed to be mobile as well.
Yes.
And so we'll be talking about
often.
that. Oh, I'm sure. I can't wait. I can't wait. In fact, even when you tried bringing it up when we got in this morning, I was like, I don't want to talk about it.
You're right.
Because I want the
I
very
purposely did
genuine
not
reaction.
send you pictures, but I was like, I gotta right at the last minute post about
You
it.
posted online, and I about near had a kitten because I was like, because of course that's what all I did this weekend was work on the house build. Because now my wife, who doesn't watch this episode, or any of these episodes,
Go time.
it's go time,
Yeah.
right? It's as if we didn't know we were supposed to be moving into this a month ago.
Yeah.
So, and then she threatened that she was going to actually watch or listen to the podcast because I've got this fantastic footage of her trying to kick down a wall in the house.
Why was that footage not given to me?
Well, because I have respect for my wife, and
I don't see anything bad about that.
and
right?
I actually want to move, not get divorced. So, so she's like, I might actually. She's like, I'm gonna get those guys. You can't run that footage. That better not exist anywhere.
It's 2022. Everything exists everywhere.
Everything exists everywhere, folks. If this is your first time joining us, we are a full service parts, accessory sales, Jeep specific business. And this is the podcast, which represents all of those goodies that we run into on a daily, and then just the kind of the bigger than life things that we find ourselves involved in. So we appreciate you joining us on whatever streaming platform you are on. We have experienced immense growth in the past. We're not even a year in at this point, and it's been fantastic. We've got all these, little metrics that tell us how good we're doing. Yay. Episode 33, and we will be talking about coming up this weekend is the OVJ, Oil Valley Jeeps, 10-mile for 2-mile run, which is close to my heart. And we'll be talking briefly about that today. We're also going to be starting a series, which I think we feel pretty passionate about. And we're going to be running that series for several episodes, much like we did with the motors, replacement for displacement, which we drug out for way too long. We'll be doing lights and lockers, right? The debate. And then we'll be doing kind of a special episode in 3 weeks or so because I'll be on the road heading to the great PA All Breeds Jeep Show. So we've got some really interesting stuff coming up in the very near future. If you are so inclined, there's these fun stickers here. Those of you who are listening in is a cartoonized, goofy perspective of Scott and I, the mad scientist, and myself. For $4.19, that supports the podcast, directly. We appreciate everybody who's listening, who's downloaded, who's left reviews, all of those very cool things to help continue and further the media experience of SFJ 4x4. Because if you didn't know, we have a very healthy YouTube and obviously the streaming podcast nature, and then all of the great photography, all of the very cool media stuff that we have brought to the community. So we appreciate that support. You did a camper thing this weekend.
I did a camper thing.
You usually like to give us an update on the car you're building.
Well, we'll do that too.
Also, I'm wearing my super slick. Davey and I have got our I Speak Jeep podcast shirts on.
Yeah, I thought about it.
Is that what you were looking over to see who's wearing the shirt?
I was looking over to see if you had your shirt on.
Yeah, I thought about bringing it and switching, but I was taking kids to grandma, so yeah.
I'd like to be with Joe Harper in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Let's just be honest.
How hot is it down there?
I don't think it's that hot. I honestly, we are in like the Hades
Don't say it.
in northeastern Ohio. It's been this big body is not equipped for the temperature. That
but I mean, there's record temperatures across the country. Texas just hit a record yesterday, 111 degrees.
Yeah, it could be far worse.
No, thank you.
That's why my hard top's always on and the AC works. Anywho, so
I love Chuck with the doors off, windows off, ride it like a Harley
until you're at a traffic light.
Nah.
So the 36 ongoing disaster of floor repair found more rust. Surprise.
Surprise.
So cutting that out, I did do a update onto Instagram about that. And the motor is this close for being done at the engine shop and coming home. And then I get to do the valve train, which will probably take forever. But
don't sound too enthusiastic about that.
Very tired people.
No.
So then into Campergeddon. So
you just quick. Wait a second. Joe Harper just responded. High of 81 today with a constant breeze on the beach.
I could deal with
it's
that.
better there than it is going to be today here.
Oh, buddy.
Yeah.
And I'm a Outer Banks fan at this point, and I'm watching all these people hang out, and it's in the 80s and breezy on the beach, and I'm thinking, God, that's just perfect.
Yep.
All right.
So we have a family reunion coming up that we always go and camp, and the last couple of years that's been the only thing we've used the camper for. And you always forget how broken something is when you put it away and then you don't ever use it. And my wife's like, we should probably get the camper out of its storage. And
that was the first mistake.
And that was the first mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And when I put it away, I had borrowed a really cool tractor with a bucket and it had a 3-point that raises and lowers. You guys, that's what normal people do with their
normal
tractors.
Yes.
Where I have a 1939 Alice Chalmers tractor that doesn't do any of those things.
Has a drawbar, a fixed drawbar, right?
So to get it out of the building, now that my very good friend Jeff always comes over and bails me out of nightmarish projects, we added 3 inches of stone to the bottom of my storage. Well, that raises the camper 3 inches.
Yep.
So suddenly my 10x10 door that just cleared the AC unit before on the Jeep no longer does that.
OMG.
So she's like, we need to get the camper out. And I was like, how am I going to get the camper out when I don't have a tractor with a 3-point? She obviously didn't give me a permission to go buy that.
No.
So,
why not?
That backfired at me. So I'm trying to come up with the best way to do it. So you know how I did it?
How did you dig out the stone?
I thought about that, and I also thought about airing the
tires down.
Classic.
Classic when you lift a Jeep in a garage is too short.
So I was like, what do we own that has a hitch ball? Not the right size hitch ball. That's not a qualifier.
No. You just need a ball.
Just a ball. So my B has a ball too high. It's about knee height, just in case you wondered. Jeep, no go. She said I should have used her mom's Subaru Forester, but that left. So then I thought, well, if we're going to do that, then we obviously just should use the 4-wheeler. So 4-wheeler is about ankle height. So you couldn't get the jack crank was going to hit the rack. So we had to crank it all the way down drag the floor jack from the front garage, which is a little distance.
That's a good haul.
Jack up the frame of the trailer so that I could then have her back underneath of it, drop it on the ball, and then kick the board out from underneath the jack, and it just missed the door seal.
How come you didn't tell me about this part yesterday?
Because we were very distracted with no floor.
So wait a second.
Because where I came in, it was
wondered.
literally a text of a couple pictures, and I'm in trouble. Was
Yes.
literally your text.
Yes.
I'm in trouble.
So just in case you wondered, Kawasaki 360 4-wheel drive needs to be in low range 4-wheel drive to pull a camper out of a building.
Let's contextualize this a little bit for those people who might be joining us in general. What is your camper?
My camper is 2016 Clipper. Try to remember the Bradshaw brand name. It's a 17-foot BH bunkhouse. It's actually about 21 feet long if you count the tongue.
All right, so we're 21 overall. Do
Yep.
we know our dry weight on it?
About 2,800 pounds.
All right, about 2,800 pounds dry weight.
Yep.
21 feet overall.
Mm-hmm.
And the
With a four-wheeler.
the cow 360 did it. I like
it did.
it.
It needed low range, but it did it.
I believe it.
And I pulled it right up to the shed. So that was Saturday after work, and we were like, yay, we made it. So then we went for a ride in the Rambler, went up to a car show up in Mentor that I hadn't been to in for probably 6-7 years. That was pretty nice. Until kids were tapping out. I'm like,
They reached peak fun.
I need food. I
Yep.
need bed. So we left that. And so Sunday morning I get up and wife is at work. And I'm like, I'm going to pull the camper up into the driveway. So I move all my cars.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to go through the neighbor's driveway because the camper is so tall.
We're sorry, neighbor.
Yeah, I'm very sorry, neighbor. But he's a great neighbor. Lets me do that every year. And I pull it up, and I needed to move her Jeep. I can't remember exactly what I was exactly doing, but I paused for a moment. It's hooked onto the JK, and I'm in the shade, right by where my kids play all the time. And I thought, I'm in the shade. It's a nice breeze. It's not too hot. Kids aren't killing themselves. They're not dying of hunger. I'm going to just pull up the tread and look at the floor that I know is soft. And I had told Jeff about this. I had a small soft spot. And he's like, oh, we could just put a piece of plywood in there temporarily. It's like, okay.
So it's a 2016 tow behind.
Yes.
Right?
That's-
Bumper pull. For those of you who
important.
are...
It's always stored inside.
And it is always stored inside. So one of these days we will actually talk about camping and campers and the perspective of overlanding and whatnot. And we have like this really cool adventure trailer here, and of course Joe, who's joining us, he's camped across the country. He's got like a crawler hauler set up, and we've got customers who just randomly show up in buses with Jeeps, and all the cool stuff.
Perfectly normal.
Yeah, for us at SFJ, for us at SFJ, perfectly normal people overlanding, camping, using it's part of the Jeep life, realistically. Yes. Good morning, Chuck, by the way. And so anyway, so 16, you know that you've got a little bit of a soft spot.
Yes, and time going 100 miles an hour, I forgot that the previous owner had told me that, oh, by the way, it had a soft spot inside the door. I fixed it. It's not a big deal.
Realistically, you bought this in like 18.
Yeah, it was just a couple years old when I bought it.
Yeah, it was only like 2 years old.
And so,
good morning, Diana.
I start pulling this apart, and there's a little wall it holds up our front bed that was impeding progress of pulling up the floor. And then I immediately tore the floor, and it was kind of like first blood of the day. And
drew first blood.
And I start unscrewing the wall, and I realize that it goes into the plumbing, and that's not coming out.
Oh boy.
So then I'm like going right for the saw, and I'm like, obviously this is going downhill fast. I think I'm in trouble because the floor was literally just crumbling in my hands. It was just falling apart.
There's video of that.
Yes.
And maybe we'll figure out how to insert it here into
Yeah, it was very bad. And then I realized really quickly that the floor supports, the actual timber that support the floor, like the floor joists, were also falling apart. And I was like, okay. And this is all wet. and there was a board that was right inside the door. I didn't realize at first that was the repair from before. So I sent a picture to Jeff, and I was like, I think I'm in trouble. I'm not gonna be like white flag, help me, please kind of thing. But he's always a good sport.
I'm gonna take a moment and contextualize with our listeners and viewers, right? So Scott is many things amazing with vehicles and nuts and bolts and metal work, and he is a guy who has always had this, semi-photographic memory of the matrix of how a vehicle, the melding of wire and metal and gasoline and explosions work and make you happy. But God forbid the man ever work with wood in his whole entire life.
I can't weld wood. I've tried.
He loves welding, right? If he makes a mistake, he can just,
weld it back on,
glue it together, right? Hot glue it with a welder back together.
You can't do that with wood.
Can't do that with wood. And so he has always struggled with the average home repair. Now, insert our other, two primary characters, Jeff the Italian Stallion Sharamonte, wearer of many hats, and then our performance mechanic.
But not this one.
And Greg Lenz, our performance mechanic, who these guys are jacks of many trades, right? And that's what makes them so dangerous in the service and repair field. So,
and honestly, part of my problem with house stuff is I want it to be exact. Like, I want my cut to be right on the thing. I want no gaps. I want the screws going right every time. That's not how houses work.
It's not. I mean,
no.
you actually get a little more leeway in the house.
A lot of fudge.
I find myself. John Graber says, "Sorry to hear Scott is struggling with wood." There's doctors. There's discreet Facebook ads.
I don't know how many blue
that.
pills it would take to fix this camper.
Oh my god. Yeah,
you know what your camper doesn't have though? Stiff door syndrome.
Stiff door syndrome. It doesn't.
or stiff wall syndrome.
We don't have stiff door or stiff wall at SFJ. We have got no problems there. If you don't know that ad, Jeff did a fantastic ad for Kentrol indoor inserts. Fantastic. Stiff door syndrome.
Yep.
So anyway, so let me step back from the contextualization to say, that's where you're at. You're panicking because now it's a house.
It's a house
on wheels. It was okay when it was wheels, and now it's a house.
Now it's a house.
Yep.
So, Jeff sweeps in with the whole family in tow, and Kristen takes it like a champ.
You brought the whole family over.
I did.
Good
and
man.
Kristen kept my kids alive until Amy got home.
Okay.
And we removed the wall first thing. And he watched me try to use a Sawzall with wood, and he decided that I needed a circular saw instead.
Mm-hmm.
So we removed that and peeled up more floor and peeled up more floor and more floor and more. And it just kept going and going and going the whole time. And right beside the doorway is the refrigerator cabinet.
Mm-hmm.
And we kept saying, like, if it goes underneath the refrigerator cabinet, that's going to be a bad time.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, it's gone all the way to the front nose of the camper at this point.
Way it hasn't gone
It has
back.
no way it has not gone this way. So next thing you know, the refrigerator's out. And then we're taking away the wall of the cabinet that's just luckily stapled in place. And then we're cutting the bottom of the next cabinet off inside. And then we're removing the plate from underneath the fridge to hold air gap for the LP line, and it's just growing and growing and growing. And where the rot stopped? About
at the end of the camper,
about that far from the wheel.
Oh yeah. So there's a picture of most of it.
Yeah, that
removed.
that was actually
2016.
Yes, and actually we cut more.
We did cut more of that.
So you see right in front of the door, it goes all the way over about another foot past the cabinet. We end up taking that all the way over, and then you can see the carnage of my foot. And we end up going straight up, and finally the camper's like, okay, you've torn me apart enough. Here's some solid wood. And the beam underneath that wall was completely rotten.
That first little wood framing that you see, the dark brown, that's where the fridge was. Yep.
That's the LP
We took out
line.
the sidewall, the cabinetry, and everything.
So what where was it leaking? Where is the moisture intruding?
So this is the really part that really makes me sad. Is I was like really perturbed. Like, is this off your feet? What's going on? And when I got the camper, there was a white corrugated, almost like wire loom size tube that was haphazardly stuck out of the bottom grate, that hole right behind the refrigerator cabinet there. And the wall, or the little door, was actually trying to fall off. So, I just was trying not to overcomplicate it. I knocked a little spot out of the vent, and I ran the tube out, and I reattached that, and that's the way that's been going forever. The right by the fridge is ground zero. So come to find out, what we had figured out is the vent tube, or the drain tube, or whatever you want to call it, decandescent tube for the fridge. That's a word. Anyway,
decandescent tube.
He used a big word, and he used
it.
He used it yesterday too, and it threw me off yesterday too.
That's okay. And he knew I was going to use it on the podcast.
Did you just make that up?
I did.
Yes.
So
decandescent tube.
So
God, I love this man. Okay.
So I think it's actually the manufacturer's fault, because they never bothered.
It's always the manufacturer's
to
fault.
put the tube through the floor where it would just drain out the bottom of the camper. And the previous owner realized that was an issue, put in the 2x8 inside the door because he tried to fall through, and was like, we want a bigger camper. What do we do with things that are problems? Move them on down the highway.
We send them on to somebody else.
It's your first camper? Perfect.
The 2x8 though was the best part, because we're looking at it going, that looks like it used to be a 2x8. It's slightly bigger than a 2x6, but it's all rotted off.
Yeah.
And then Scott's worried about how they attached it in, and I'm like, I don't think it's attached, Scott. He's like, no, it looks like it is. I literally grabbed the board and just pulled it out.
Oh,
it was
just
literally
shoved
just
in there.
loosely set in there.
Yeah.
You have towed that camper
a lot.
A lot.
Yes. And that front corner of the building was not really doing anything.
No, there's no attachment points were left.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a carriage bolt in the front corner. There's one on the one side of the door, another one on the other side of the door in front of the wheel, and all of them were compromised. So that whole side was just hanging on for dear life. And at some point, we were just removing screws out of the floor and looking at them like, oh, that's black, that's bad. That's where it's rotten still. When screws would just spin, we're like, yep, that's bad.
Spin.
Yeah. So at this point, it's another valuable thing we learned is, or I learned, a 2x2 is not a 2x2. Why in the world do we do this?
He didn't understand that lumber was not true
This
sizes.
is metal versus wood.
So we had to explain that a 2x4 is 1.5 by 3.5.
Yes, sir.
Or it was, because we went and bought 2x2s.
So 2x2s used to be 1.5 by 1.5. Apparently,
that's not the case anymore.
That they've changed that now. It's 1.25.
So,
I think you bought some bunk wood. What?
Nope.
So at the 9th hour, we're sunlight's going away. This has gone on all day at this point, and Jeff had donated to the cause angle brackets and tape and all kinds of extra stuff. He's got a saw set up, and we're running the generator for power. We got the whole workshop going. I got almost every Milwaukee tool I own over at the camper. And we go, and he makes this framework where we went to put the first board in right underneath that wall, and there's a 1/4 inch gap difference.
No.
And I'm like, that's not going to get it done, Sam.
Yeah, it was at that point is, do we shim it or do we pivot? And we pivoted.
So I went and shook my garage and got 4 2x4s. And he's like, well, they're wider than we need to be. And at that point, I was like, I don't care. He's like, are we adding weight to your camper? I said, we're removing all this water. I don't care. And so I should have got a picture, but like I said, it was when sun was going down, tools needed picked up. It was like almost 10 o'clock, and we couldn't run the generator anymore because I want to be able to use my neighbor's driveway.
That's right.
However, fireworks were going off as we were cleaning up.
It's not the 4th of July anymore, people. Anyway, so at this point, there is a 2x4 wrapped in plastic against the outside wall, replacing that, and then there is 2 more replacing the other ones, and we have to make the sheeting to go in, and we got to wedge that on top of the 2x4 against the wall
and under the
looks
cabinets.
Very daunting to me, but Jeff says we got this.
You got this.
And it's nothing square, even though it's a 2016. So we got to do fancy cutting. Thank God Jeff's doing that, because I would just I just make it wide and fill it with something at this point. And the entire floor, the linoleum is garbage at this point. We just started ripping it up and throwing it out.
I mean,
many holes of the camper.
It's got a nice clean cut, but it'd be a really weird seam at this point. So you just need to replace it.
Wow.
Yep.
Fun with campers, and like I said, we will at some point in time dedicate a whole show or series of shows to different kind of campers and whatnot. And I had a 78 Coachman truck camper, and it didn't have half the rot, and the wood was solid and square.
We came to a conclusion that if it's kind of, Serpent did this, or however you say that.
Folks, he's not drinking.
No,
I'm just
I
telling
can't
you.
Talk. My wife shared a thing. It's really important. If you learn how to talk by reading, you talk like I do, and that's exactly what happened. I didn't have any friends around me my age growing up, and I
now he's giving the sob story because of the fact that you just picked on him.
I had no friends.
I didn't. So I didn't interact with anybody or have to talk to anybody. So I read 24 hours a day almost.
Yes.
So that's where I learned all my big words.
Oh,
I had to make it up.
Words.
Anyway,
Scott, if you're still too intimidated, Chuck has a
camper for
rent cheap.
I don't think you want my kids tearing apart your camper.
No, we don't. We don't.
And I want to sleep. That's not enough space for two very rambunctious young kids.
That's right. The bunkhouse was a perfect option.
Perfect option.
While it existed.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to continue to exist.
Yes, now it will.
The fun fact of all this is I was going to be working on my camper this weekend had I not been pulled over to his. And mine's worse than his.
God bless you. God bless you, Jeffrey.
So, but we came to the conclusion if we wouldn't have fixed this now, there probably wouldn't have been a camper to fix. If it would have continued and started coming the other direction into the camper more. I mean, we're almost to the dinette at this point. So that's half the camper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the axle's pitched back, so there's a lot more camper in the front of the axle than behind. And we're solidly to the wheel all the way to the front of the camper. I mean,
that's sad.
That's more than 8 feet right there.
Yeah, we're easily a third of the camper.
So what I mean, as a kind of just a moral of the story, when we look at these adventure trailers that are so hot and so popular right now, and we see them running $25,000 to $35,000, and you go, well, that seems a lot of money for a camper.
Yeah.
Not to say that yours wasn't worth whatever you spent on it, but a lot of these independent camper manufacturers. I know Chuck has one, and he's happy to show it to anybody who'd like to. I think it's an Expedition 2.0. Anybody who'd like to check his out. There's a reason why they're so expensive.
Yeah.
These independents are just better made.
Yes.
Than some of the traditional family units that.
Yeah, and mine is totally at this point. It's like a box store that makes 90% of the campers. And they make them for all the names.
Correct.
The frames are all made in the same spot. The shells are all made in the same spot, and they just slap a different sticker on it. And, yeah.
Yeah, wow, that hurts, man.
Yeah, just because they didn't drill one hole. But I'm going to fix that. So
There you go. I am, I too was overwhelmed in embodying all of this woodworking as I tore down walls and put up walls.
Scott hurt me a little bit with the comment he made about that. He goes, what would be very helpful right now? A nail gun.
Yeah, there's a lot of toe boarding.
What? Oh.
But in true Jeff fashion, he has more than one nail gun.
Yes.
He has a mini nail gun that's more camper size, but that was not with us, and we didn't have the time to go get it.
Okay, well,
did you bring it this time?
No.
I'm going to admit
We're
something.
screwing the
I'm going to
plywood
admit.
down.
Wait a second. I'm going to admit something here on air, and I just need to do it. I bought the Milwaukee.
Ooh.
So you can have yours back.
Yeah. You went with the battery?
I did.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I don't blame you.
That
was a lot to have a compressor generator running for that.
You know what? I got to the point Saturday morning, and I needed to start putting up the king studs and jack studs.
And really,
building
what's
this whole
a big
combo.
project unless you buy a tool?
unless you buy a tool, you know.
Right?
And Jeffrey, and I thank you so much for offering up the your Makita, which would have been beautiful. Or was it Makita? Is it?
No.
We talked about this.
Yeah, it's the
God darn it all! What is that?
Matabo. or
Matabo.
that's what
which
it
is a nice one. But it was the process of I showed up Saturday morning. I needed to get stuff done. I needed to grab my lumber order at the depot, and I did not have a compressor here. I had the generator at the work site, but I did not have a compressor. And I was like, you know what? Because I'd left it at home, and I'd reached peak fund myself. I'm like, I need this house to start going back together.
Yep.
And I bought the framer.
So I'm gonna admit something too.
Okay.
Jeff brought over this corded little saw that I'd never saw before.
Oscillating saw.
That has this little blade that goes like this.
The multi-tool, the oscillator.
Yep.
And I thought, meh, that can't be that awesome.
It is.
It is.
It is amazing. and we're running the generator to run his, and I'm like, gulp, 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 $5 gallon gas. So we went to go get wood, and I'm like, I'm gonna go.
You
I'm
bought
just
it.
gonna go look at it.
Did you do it?
I'm just go look at
You
it.
did it. You did it.
It was $100.
Oh, well,
I'm like,
Cha-ching.
I can't do it.
the blades cost almost as much as the dang tool.
Yes.
Oh, gosh.
So I'm sorry, honey. I bought a tool. I was at the Home Depot.
What project? And it's Milwaukee.
It's Milwaukee.
I know.
And the funniest part is you're like, well, did you like the 2-year service plan on that? I was like, it's covered for 5 years.
Yeah.
So no.
What a heck of an upsell to do.
Yeah.
Why would I want a 2-year plan?
The
when I
only
got a 5-year
difference
already?
is you get to deal with the store versus dealing with
Meh.
Milwaukee, but you get
know
that
what?
taken care of.
Knock on wood, Milwaukee hasn't let us down yet.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Hashtag not sponsored.
Yes.
We're not
We-
endorsing anybody.
You should sponsor us, Milwaukee.
You should.
We would love
because
it.
I'll
the
show you
entire
pictures.
facility is
You don't even have to
dedicated
sponsor
you.
us with money, just tools.
Yeah,
Yes.
just tools.
Batteries. I'd be okay
and
with
namesake.
Batteries, right?
And namesake at this point. We've already spent a small fortune on your company. So, because they just flat out work.
Yeah.
You know?
I think I'm going to try that little multi-tool on my floor in the car. They make metal blades for that. I was really excited. That was honestly what sealed the deal.
All right. So, anyways, I've got king studs going up on one side of the house. I'm cutting top plates, replacing. I had to pull out 2x12 in a corner board. I'm trying to shore up the corner, kind of
Did you use
create a
your
good
multi-tool?
foundation. I don't have a multi-tool yet.
Why don't you have a multi-tool?
Seriously-
Everyone needs a
seriously,
multi-tool.
Everyone needs now. Look at you. Now you're championing a multi-tool.
Now,
at this
just to be
point.
clear, even though he's picking on the fact that mine was quartered, it was only $20 for mine.
Shh. She knows that.
But you got a Milwaukee, so
right, and you're going to spend the money. Spend it once, be done. You know
Yeah,
what I
we
mean?
had that conversation.
yeah, we did.
You know what? Years ago, 10 years ago, I used to buy Harbor Freight grinders, and I just, you got them for $15. Normally priced $9.99 with the coupon, and you walk out the door, and they're right there, and you're like, you know what? Of course, I can buy a grinder for that.
Yeah.
And then you go through
All the
6,
grinders.
and you're in the middle of the job, and the grinder lets out a puff of its soul, and
Yeah.
it smells burnt electrical.
Yep.
And you're like, oh, well, that's great. You almost, burnt my house down in my hand. And you know what? I went and I had, pretty much no money starting this company, and I went and I bought a Milwaukee corded grinder, and that darn thing is working today somewhere in the shop.
Yes, it is. And thank God.
Spend money once.
I took my 4.5 home to work on the car, which none of that happened. All
No.
the camper happened.
Yeah.
Because I was cutting off carriage bolts and nails and staples and all kinds of stuff. So
Yeah, you're cordless. You're
yes,
saying, yeah.
that is the best thing I ever bought.
So I
want
am
another
at.
one.
I see in my desire list, as we just completely hijacked this conversation into Milwaukee tool. I need the oscillating tool.
Yes.
I need my own sawzall so I can give yours back.
Maybe.
And
Yes.
I need a cutoff wheel.
And
Yeah.
to clarify the Sawzall, the reason that the Sawzall was not good for his purpose on wood
Yeah.
was because he was pointing the blade into another stud,
Ah.
trying to cut down this little piece of stud.
And mind you, my cordless one is here. So I have my dad's as old as I am, I swear, corded
Yeah.
sawzall. It just happened to have a wood blade in it. I don't know why. I don't
Why did
remember.
you were cutting Christmas trees
I
last
think it
or
was
something.
Christmas trees.
I actually do think it was
I
years
actually
ago.
think you're right. You're
Yeah.
correct. But anyway,
That was before you sold out and bought a fake one.
yeah.
Doug Gregg, I'm sorry.
So anyway, I'm in there.
One of our customers, if you guys are listening in, one of our customers has this just awesome generational Christmas tree farm.
Yep.
So highly recommend their trees. Their prize award-winning trees on this.
Yes. It is amazing.
I'm a live tree guy, always and forever.
Yep.
Anyways, go ahead.
So yeah, cordless for the win.
Do you remember that time we were going to talk about Jeep stuff?
Yeah.
Wow, we got really far down the rabbit hole.
We're way off track.
We get really passionate.
The train has left the station, and our 3 viewers have shut us off because we've not talked about Jeeps.
I'm going to apologize to Jen right now because he's going to have to go buy a oscillator or a multi-tool now.
Yeah, it's already in the cart.
Yeah, $100.
Yeah, tripped over it.
They have 4 of them in Ashtabula, in case you wonder.
4 of them in inventory. You know what? And one of our customers is store ASM at Ashtabula, and so I ran into him there, and he helped procure the nailer for me. He's the one who pushed me over the edge because I was like,
I was
oscillating, and he was like, well, I can just grab it for you off the high bay, and I was like, well, if you have to go through all of that work to get
You're
it,
making me buy it.
Then I have to buy it.
Yeah, you guilted me into it.
So remember that time we were going to talk about lights and lockers. So at least we're going to lay the groundwork.
Remember when I climbed that stump in my yard before my camper was safely in the building?
Gosh,
and I used my locker.
Wow, we're going to talk about that. We are going to talk about
I did not see that coming.
I didn't. You know, when I thought we were going to set out on this subject matter, I did not hear the sound in the far off distance of the bus that was coming for me.
He had that bus doing 100 too.
I just didn't hear it. I didn't hear the horns. I didn't know that bus was going to run me over. The story Scott is talking about, we had we may have told this on air a couple weeks ago. Scott's kid had a birthday party, which we all attended to, and of course he had the stump, which I saw, which I thought immediately I must park on. It was a missed opportunity on Scott's behalf, and Jeffrey's because they were both there.
Yes,
but Jeff's only on 35s.
Yep.
So
without lockers.
So I pulled in with Chuck, and I was like, this is mint. I will just kind of boop, boop up there. And Chuck is a Grizzly in the rear. Those of you who are unfamiliar, and hopefully we'll talk a little bit about those traction devices. Grizzly is Yukon's answer to the Detroit, right? And so when we just...
it just works.
It just works, right? And so when you are reasonably forward momentum, the cogs are interlocked with each other, and so therefore you are kind of locked out of the gate. The axles are locked together.
Yep.
And so and then as you go to round the corner, as you have a sufficient tension bind up, and it does take quite a bit,
especially when they're new.
The cogs will reasonably release, allowing for a series of one wheel spinning faster or slower than the other. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we get into the subject matter of why that would be of value. Mm-hmm. I do have an air locker, a Yukon Zip, in the front axle, but of course, because I was trying to do things the hardest way possible, I did not just wire up a ARB and make my locker work. I was attempting to use, some of you, I know certainly our viewers and a couple friends on my Facebook have noticed, I was attempting to use a single compressor pumping up a half-gallon tank to then my solenoids to ba-ba-ba-ba-ba, and of course that wasn't hooked up either. So that's all right. Chuck is done.
Why do you like air lockers? That's important for this conversation.
Well, I love air lockers.
Right. Why do you love air lockers?
They have the highest exponential clamping rate outside of the aux locker, which is a mechanical, which is just mechanically driven.
So when they're on, they got it done. They're on.
When they're on, they are on without question. And years ago, if you were running an ARB 20 years ago, they typically failed in the closed or on position. So what was actually happening? So then you still have the you can still get a comp ARB air locker, and what that means is when it fails locked.
So you're make it up the trail, you just can't turn.
You can't turn, and that was the whole idea. Was that ARB when they originally put that had that technology available, the idea was that if you broke somewhere out in the middle of no man's land or on a really wicked, rock crawl trail, you would want, the airline ripped out, the compressor died, onboard air was imperfect even just 7 years ago. The ARB compressors really revolutionized our industry. The dual tank high duty cycle, which so many of our customers are installing in their Jeeps, that revolutionized the industry because of the CFM that it was able to put out and the duty cycle that it was able to endure. But years ago, 20 plus years ago, we didn't have that as an option. We were using York air compressor. They do, Joe, and I'll mention that. Joe asked, doesn't Ox offer an air locker now? If so, is it better than the ARB? Let me finish up my statement real quick. Years ago, the lines were imperfect. The air compressors we were using was basically a converted AC compressor, which was this incredibly beautiful, robust unit the size of a men's shoebox that was under the hood.
Or if you're using electric, it was like something for an air suspension on a car.
Correct. It was air suspension. The duty cycle was insufficient because it wasn't meant to have, to run all that much.
Nope.
And then the lines, would rip out if they weren't routed correctly. And so air lockers had a bad rap, is the best way to put it.
Yep.
So what then was happening was the comp air compressors would fail closed, and you could eventually get off of the trail or off the obstacle.
You just did a 50-point turn. It was okay.
And you just did a 50-point turn. So long story short, to go back to Chuck, my air locker is not hooked up, but honestly, it doesn't matter. He can do most of anything in two-wheel drive.
That says for that stump. so then...
Except for that stomp.
So
His
then
feelings were hurt that day.
So then we go on to my Jeep.
Hold on a second, real quick. It did sit there, rammed up against that stump, and just spin the back two tires.
Totally.
It did do that,
Yes.
but it didn't go anywhere.
So that Grizzly was working. It was
Yes.
just tearing up your yard.
It's less grass to mow. So then you go to my Jeep, and it has a true track in the rear, which is also a Detroit design, but it's a limited a slip style. And then we have, is it an Ected that's in the front of the Ultimates?
No, it is not an Ected. It is actually the OE manufacturer for Dana Spicer Jeep Chrysler Corporation, which is a three-letter acronym. So what Scott's bringing up is he has an electric
an E-locker.
An E-locker. It is not an Eaton E-locker, which like Greg has in the front of his. He has an Eaton E-locker. Again, the mothership employs yet a different party who's not actually related to any of these aftermarket manufacturers, and they build the electric lockers for
more or less
Rubicons.
it's a Rubicon locker.
It is. So you have a genuine Rubicon locker in yours.
Okay.
And so
just simpler because the Jeep doesn't tell me I can't use it.
it's exactly right. It doesn't have the dual plunger integrated to the computer system.
Yeah. Safety.
Correct.
I can turn it on anytime I want.
However, the Ultimates were meant to be plugged into Rubicons and work.
Yes.
Right. And
And
so
they
that
do
was
that.
An appropriate, people saying, well, they were blowing up these JK Rubicon front axles. You could go with an Ultimate and it would seamlessly integrate to your Jeep.
Right.
It is an electric locker that works similarly, but that's why there's no rebuild kits, there's no aftermarket support, because they are an OE manufacturer only.
Okay.
So anyways, you've got that in the front, and you've got a true track. And so that's a really important thing. Folks who are listening, we're going to talk about limited slip differentials. We're going to talk about these umbrellas as we go forward in the next couple series of podcasts, which you're not going to want to miss because we're gonna talk it through
A lot.
You thought we were excited about engines and old
Yes.
engines, man. I get real hot and bothered over axles.
Yep.
So
You'll notice a trend. We like to be able to steer, so we like our selectables in the front, and we like our backs just to work.
Yep.
We don't want to think about it.
we don't want to think about it necessarily. And so Detroit, as a manufacturer years ago, and that was a standalone company, they have the Detroit is the best way to conceptualize and say that is a mechanical locker which has the hard, aggressive cogs.
Yep.
We don't necessarily recommend those in daily driven vehicles.
Yep.
And then the Detroit True Track, which is actually made by Eaton at this point. So for those of you who are actually still listening and actually care, it is the Eaton Detroit True Track, which is what's probably one of the most popular traction devices on the interwebs.
One of the things I like about it, because I'm cheap, is it just takes regular old gear oil. It doesn't need a limited slip additive, and as long as your tires are touching the ground, it works.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just make our Jeep a slinky, and we're good.
Yeah, it's all then into the suspension. If you're regularly going to be lifting a wheel, maybe not the best option. A selectable or a full locker is a better option for you.
Yeah.
So you have that, and then you have the Ultimate 44 with the e-locker set up in the front.
Yep.
And you just booped up onto the stump.
Yep.
And made me and Chuck look foolish. Yep, that's the moral of that story.
And when if we were to get in the rocks and do a really more competition style rock crawling, all the bloopers
he
today.
started off so strong with that big word this morning, and now
anyway, mine could give up. It could release or slip by where Neil's would not.
That's right. That's the difference, is that the robust clamping pressure and then the design of the actual cogs that again hold the pressure from axle side to axle side together.
And that's also why he has a 60 and a 14 in his, and I have a 44 and a 44 in mine.
Right. And it's all about the right tool for the right job. And we have friends and acquaintances who have buggies, and they're spooled at that point. That buggy goes onto a trailer, it gets the snot beat out of it. It has hydraulic, ram assist or full ram steering. Doesn't care whether things are locked one way or the other, or steering, is tight or tough. And we actually have friends and acquaintances who will run a spooled locker on the street.
Yep.
It doesn't mean that it can't be done. It wears down your tires. You squawk in the gas station. And
I remember a guy getting in trouble with a cop because they had a spool and it tripped the tires and they got yelled at.
Oh, just because he chirped it a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, usually shouldn't be that big of a deal, but...
Yeah. It might have been throttle, too, involved.
Oh, yeah, totally. We got to show everybody. You show off.
Yes.
Chuck sounds like he's got a V8 in him just because I can squawk tires going around a corner,
So now you got to really talk about Joe's question.
So Joe Harper asked, doesn't the Ox offer an air locker now? If so, is it better than the ARB? So the interesting thing about Ox, and I probably will spend a few minutes talking about Ox specifically in a coming episode. They, as a company, have oh my gosh, where do I start? It's interesting because they don't have the biggest aftermarket support. You typically wait a little longer for their product lines. They're not as always readily available as other locker manufacturers, but they do work well when adjusted well. There's a lot of mechanical adjustment that goes into making an Ox work well.
If you like to tinker with a carburetor or drive a manual shift transmission, then you really like an Ox.
So what Ox has available is basically, it is the same reasonably proprietary design of the locker itself, so the carrier itself, and then they have basically a air pump that
cylinder.
Yeah, it's an air operated cylinder. So if you've ever seen an Ox locker, they are a cable activated locker, so it's a mechanical clamping mechanism, and so basically they have a port in their diff cover typically, and as you pull this cable or you throttle the cable, it physically engages the side gears in the to achieve that clamping pressure, and so now they're physically and mechanically activated. There's a stick inside your cab. It runs via cable out to the locker, and you zoop, push it, and now things are locked up tight.
And
so
people like that because as long as it's hooked up and it's adjusted right, and you move the lever and it's not broken, it's going to work.
It should reasonably work. And then it kind of stays locked in place as long as that cable, because again, we're applying physical pressure through the whole system from handle to cable to, a little push rod. What they came out with, because there's a lot of people who don't want this kind of cumbersome cable system.
Well, then you got to think about exhaust and suspension movement and what does it rub on? How do I let it move with the axle? All that kind of happens. There's steering, loving on the cable.
I was going to say, I think Ox was built at a time where our vehicles were slightly simpler. If we go back to YJs and TJs, they were a little more rudimentary as far as our interior was concerned. So if you wanted to add 2 or 3 stick shifts in your cabin, A, you had a little bit of room to do that, and B, you were a little less discerning. Yeah. You were doing it because it was like truly critically necessary for how you were using your vehicle. In the last 15 years of the popularity of the JK and the JL, and kind of everybody wants a locker because the cool kids have lockers before Lightbars. Adding those big sticks and cables in the JK and the JL kind of becomes
really problematic. So how do we make them work? Because 44 is a 44 is a 44 sort of. So we can make it go into these pretty nicely.
Right. The locker itself can reasonably go into the axle itself, but how do we actually make it work for how the end user wants to have it installed in their vehicle?
Yep. So replace the cable with an air cylinder, and you just press a button, have an air supply somehow, some way, and then you have an air locker.
Yeah. It's really just that simple. And Ox, is it better than the A or B or the Zip at that point?
I think it's all about what you want to do with it. How does it fit in your vehicle? What space do you have? All the other ones, you have a port on top of the axle, and how do you route that line up through the suspension where the Ox is going to have a cylinder off the side of the diff cover. So now we're coming out this way. Can we protect the cylinder? That kind of stuff. You have to look at all those metrics.
Right. And I'll be honest, we haven't worked enough with the Ox Air version. I have had a couple customers loosely interested in it. But typically speaking, I don't see a huge differentiation at a minor, like the finite minutia of what actually, the chrome moly case, the cogs, the so on and so forth, to say why we should choose the Ox over an ARB over a Zip. At this exact moment, I really like to continue to use the ARBs or the Zips for our air options. Greg and I have a lot of extensive conversations about kind of the differences between the air activation of the different kind of the primary air lockers to this point. And as far as how that aftermarket support is there, customer service, technical information that we have as an industry, I would be inclined to kind of stay the course with ARB and Zip if you're going to go air, because it's kind of tried and true at this point. If you are a person who's tinkering and who's building and who's tweaking, and you want to go the route of playing with the Ox, then I think that's viable. But a piece I always talk, a lot of our customers are coming to us for a level of longevity and customer integrity, and so we're going to work with.
Well, a lot of places, people just want their Jeep together, and they know what it's going to do out of the box, have an expectation for that, and then they just want it to work. And so at that point, we become almost like a recipe. We're going to use this part for this kind of situation, and then we know the outcome. Where the Ox, you can get in there, you can tweak it, you can maneuver it a little bit, make it work better, but you have to take all that time to do that.
Yeah, there is a level of fine-tuning involved in making the Ox work.
And there's some customers that love that.
Oh, absolutely.
They're all about it.
Yeah. Yeah, they want us to get them, 90% of the way, and then they want to fine tune for the next, couple, months or whatever, and that's fine.
Yep.
It's each person's discretion of how they're approaching their vehicle. So, folks, we're going to continue to talk about lockers in the future. We're going to make this umbrella, this broad umbrella statement of traction devices, right? And under traction devices, we're gonna kind of
so many.
I'm gonna set up kind of a line graph, and at one end I'm gonna call selectable. In one position, we're gonna call it our say our mechanical. Well, actually, what we ended up doing is we go selectable, and then we have limited slip differential, so LSD, right, which is not the kind that you ingest, but the kind that makes your Jeep go over cool obstacles.
But hey, if you want to chew on a diff, we won't judge you.
No, that's fine. So we have selectable, and then we have limited slip. So you have this umbrella, and then underneath those two categories, that's when we get this kind of this broad spectrum of the types of selectable to a clutch-driven, what you might call a posi unit, to a mechanical-driven limited slip differential, over to an actual spooled locker. So, and important to note, in today's vernacular, many people, average customers, that umbrella that I'm calling traction devices, call those lockers. And we'll talk a little bit about the verbiage used at your local Jeep meet night, and when people say, "Oh yeah, I've got a locker from the factory, and I've got this and I've got that." Oh yeah, I had my locker service, that kind of stuff. And what does that mean? And then what are those actual traction devices that people are talking about? So that is what you have to look forward to. If we can ever, stop talking about camper builds and hot rods and houses, tiny house living off the grid stuff, and actually the meat and potatoes of Jeep-ness. I want to take 5 minutes and talk about Oil Valley Jeep Association, Oil Valley Jeeps. I'm not sure if they have. I'm just making up. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was going to do the transition for our trail spotlight.
And now it's time for our product spotlight.
Now it's time for
Trail Spotlight.
Can we just have his kid do the trail spotlight part? Like, what is the first part
I
of
don't
the
know what that
Well,
is.
I didn't get a chance to do much editing because I was too busy working on Scott's camper this weekend.
Yes.
So we just reused the.
What's the ooh part? That's the piece that I. Ooh.
Oh, boy.
Is that your kid as well, or is that?
No.
That's you. That's you. That's
not
Jeff.
me.
That's Jeff.
That's totally Jeff.
That's totally Jeff. And he's just speed. Oh my god.
He's a shower singer,
It was a loop. It wasn't me.
No,
It's
totally
not a
Jeff.
loop. It's
No.
totally Jeff. Anybody who's actually still listening knows that that's Jeff.
Yeah.
All right. So, all right, we're going to talk about this Oil Valley Jeep because I get really passionate about the history of our industry. And if you've spent, I don't know, more than 30 seconds and I've stopped vomiting finite minutia about how your Jeep works, I then will transition into like this. Look like a slap on the.
Yes.
This is like
We're going right into the
events.
events.
I'm going right into where did Jeeping come from, and certainly in our area, the aftermarket support. It's one of the things I'm really proud about, like the backdrop here. This. I like to call the heartland of Jeep culture in Butler, PA, and Toledo, and so on and so forth. In this area, and you've heard us mention it before, there was these really rockin' clubs. And these clubs were every walk of life, and you had a 4x4, and you wanted to show it off.
Or use it.
Well, and use it. I mean, honestly, most of these guys were
using
and gals
guys.
were using it.
Yeah.
And this was at a time coming out of the 60s and 70s into the 80s. Hot rod culture was big. We were starting to see the birth of aftermarket support for your car culture, right? Because of course years ago before that it was just the Sears catalog. You could order your extra little parts and pieces.
It was a J.C. Whitney catalog.
Wachowskis. It was a Wachowskis catalog, and so it was just. this really cool thing where these folks got together and they established basically race courses.
Yeah.
And there was what was really big with your Jeep was sand drags, because of course we were working under the influence of the hot rod scene.
Yes.
Right. I was
We're just going to take it and twist it to what we do.
100%. And so there was sand drags or mud drags for your initial off the starting line. Hill climbs, because a hot rod can't do a hill climb per se.
Ish.
Well, not the way that these folks were doing it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, totally.
And
Obstacle course.
and then the obstacle course, right? And honestly, honest to Pete, we see the timed comp obstacle course run us all the way through into the early 2000s, right? So,
It just got more crazy as it went on.
absolutely. Big shout out to EJP, which was one of the local clubs that kind of picked up in the 90s into the 2000s. That's Erie Jeep people, and they regularly did comp courses, and they were building Jeeps to competitively hit points, climb obstacles, and get through a particular predetermined circuit. However, they're not the ones who invented it. That had been going on for decades prior.
Yeah.
What does all this mean for OVJ and 10 Mile for 2 Mile, right? This is an event this weekend outside of Oil City, Pennsylvania. So 2 Mile Park is now owned by the county that it is in. It is, I'll just read briefly what they've put. The event, which is the reason I'm reading too, because the acronym doesn't actually make it shorter. It is TM for TMJR. Nobody's saying that. No, so 10
definitely
Mile.
Not me.
The 10 Mile for 2 Mile Jeep Run, TM for TMJR, is a fundraising event that benefits 2 Mile Run County Park. And here's why I get so excited about this. This park, prior to it being owned by the county, was some type of derelict farmland or mining area. I'm not sure. And this is where all of the Jeep runs and competitions were done years ago. So if you were one of these folks who was in the clubs
With your flat fender or your CJ5.
with your flat fender, your CJ, and you were going out for the weekend to do racing and competitive, trail riding and obstacle courses, you were going to this particular piece of property, this area. And so this for me has heritage to it. And then there was a guy there named Pappy Fry, and Pappy Fry was building, these wild race-inspired Jeeps. And the mods that they were doing to these Jeeps is what then allowed our aftermarket to take hold in the manner that it did, because there were industry businesses that then sprung up through, from Western Pennsylvania, through this, Youngstown, so Butler, Western PA, Oil City, over to Youngstown, Columbiana, sweep over to Dayton, right? This breadbasket space. And one of the primary spaces for the Allegheny four-wheelers was there at what is now known as 2 Mile County Park. And this property, this land, has been unpassable. It has not been allowed, it has not been permitted to have OHV vehicles on it, so off-highway vehicles on it, for decades since they closed it down. So this is where land management and trail care comes from. The good people who are currently living in there. Big shout out to a guy named Bill Kopp, and his wife have helped tirelessly work to make these trails accessible again to us as off-roaders. And so, this property went, 2-3 decades without any OHV legally allowed on the property, and now we have that opportunity to kind of to wheel where our ancestors did, where the community help started. So I'll finish reading their piece, and it says, and this is, and their event that's happening this weekend is a fundraiser for it. So the run consists of 2 5-mile wood trails for stock Wranglers or slightly modified other Jeep models. This event is open to all Jeeps. They are really appropriately sharing that with everybody, but they are saying like you basically have to have modifications if it's not a Wrangler platform. The 10-mile scenic trail is for the less adventurous. So if this is your first time getting into your Jeep, or if you have a different submodel that you want to just stretch his legs and figure out, take some cool scenic views and trail stuff, some trail pics, you can go on the 10-mile scenic trail. It's for the less adventurous. All trails encompass Venango County's beautiful 2-mile run county park. Please note that TM4TMJR is a Jeep-only event. Sorry, those of you who are running something else. It's the nature of the beast. Super cool event. This is like a 4,000-acre piece of property, and it's got a 144-mile lake in the middle of it. I love this piece of property. Let's see. Oh, excuse me. It's 2,695-acre park with a 144-acre lake in the middle of it. 38 miles of hiking, walking trails, and year-round place to have fun and enjoy the great outdoors. If you don't have anything scheduled for this weekend, you need to be there. And I know the registrations were filling up fast. They have limited availability because of the special nature of the event. And you're going to want to be able to get in line, staged. It's ran very similarly to, say, the Bantam Trails or the Jeep Jamboree USA's. So very, very cool space that I highly recommend people should go and check out and be part of and help, sustainably wheel that property so we can continue enjoying it. I would love to be there. I am actually going to, we have some listeners who are going to be helping me with the house, honestly. So I had to shift my perspective. My family did privately wheel it last year. My wife and kids, we had a spectacular time, beautiful scenic views. And we might be sending Jeffrey to the event this year. We need to reach out to the trail organizers and see what their expectations of us are. So check it out if you haven't, or support them online regardless. I think we've done our piece.
I think so.
And we're going to be talking about light bars and lockers coming up here in the very near future. We're going to do a couple, 2 or 3 episodes on that. You got questions, we're here to answer. You want to do a little Q&A live, make sure people are joining us. Facebook, 1019 a.m. Obviously on all of your favorite streaming platforms. And we did switch over to the new YouTube channel. Davey the Savage Thompson wrote me a wonderful script about, I'm supposed to be talking about why we switched over to a new YouTube channel, but did I put that in front of me despite him preparing me for it? No, I did not. So we'll do that again next week, and we'll tell you why we're on a new YouTube channel and where and how you can find us. I think you can just easily Google I Speak Jeep into the old YouTube and find all these cataloged episodes for your entertainment and information purposes.
And you want to go back and find where this hat has been, because it keeps moving every episode.
What hat?
What hat?
Until then, Jeep family, Jeep on.
Jeep on.
Jeep on.